Well, tonight we're going to do what we did last night, and that's have a very, very brief Bible reading, just one chapter from the book of wisdom. I think it's like 20 verses. And then we'll have just a little chat about it, a little Bible study. And so anyway, if you don't have time to stay for that, thank you for coming to the Rosary. It's the scourge of the devil, as one of the popes said. I think it's Pope Adrian V said that. So remember to pray the Rosary as often as you can, morning, evening, try to squeeze one in, at least a few Hail Marys in the middle of the day. So we're switching over to the Book of Wisdom, chapter 2. We're reading from the Douay-Rheims translation. We explained a little bit last night of how that came about, that translation. It predates the King James Version. It was for the English who were under persecution in Protestant England by that time. And the Old Testament and the New Testament were published decades apart. When the Old Testament was published in Douay, a city in France, and the New Testament was published in Rheims. So you got Douay-Rheims. All right, a reading from the Book of Wisdom. For they have said, reasoning with themselves, but not right, the time of our life is short and tedious, and in the end of a man there is no remedy, and no man hath been known to have returned from hell. For we are born of nothing, and after this we shall be as if we had not been. For the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and speech a spark to move our heart, which being put out, our bodies shall be ashes, and our spirit shall be poured abroad as soft air, and our life shall pass away as the trace of a cloud, and shall be dispersed as a mist, which is driven away by the beams of the sun, and overpowered with the heat thereof. And our name in time shall be forgotten, and no man shall have any remembrance of our works. For our time is as the passing of a shadow. There is no going back of our end, for it is fast sealed, and no man returneth. Come therefore, and let us enjoy the good things that are present, and let us speedily use the creatures as in youth. Let us fill ourselves with costly wine and ointments, and let not the flower of the time pass by us. Let us crown ourselves with roses before they be withered. Let no meadow escape our riot. Let none of us go without his part in luxury. Let us everywhere leave tokens of joy, for this is our portion, and this our lot. Let us oppress the poor just man, and not spare the widow, nor honor the ancient gray hairs of the aged. But let our strength be the law of justice, for that which is feeble is found to be nothing worth. Let us therefore lie in wait for the just, because he is not for our turn, and he is contrary to our doings, and upbraideth us with transgressions of the law, and divulgeth against us the sins of our way of life. He boasteth that he hath the knowledge of God, and calleth himself the Son of God. He is become a censurer of our thoughts. He is grievous unto us, even to behold, for his life is not like other men's, and his ways are very different. We are esteemed by him as triflers, and he abstaineth from our ways as from filthiness, and he preferreth the latter end of the just, and glorieth that he hath God for his Father. Let us see then if his words be true, and let us prove what shall happen to him. and we shall know what his end shall be. For if he be the true Son of God, he will defend him, and he will deliver him from the hands of his enemies. Let us examine him by outrages and tortures, that we may know his meekness and try his patience. Let us condemn him to a most shameful death, for there shall be respect had unto him by his words. These things they thought, and were deceived, for their own malice blinded them. And they knew not the secrets of God, nor hoped for the wages of justice, nor esteemed the honor of holy souls. For God created man incorruptible, and to the image of his own likeness he made him. But by the envy of the devil, death came into the world, and they follow him that are of his side. The word of the Lord. So that's chapter 2 of the Book of Wisdom. We're kind of getting into the mindset of the ungodly. They definitely have flawed reasoning as they see the world. And we see that there's moral responsibility for our actions. That's a core part, of course, of Catholic social teaching. Wanted to see if anybody on the panel had any comments or anything, any particular verse sort of stand out to you, Susan.
Good evening, Shannon. I was reading this chapter and listening to you read it as well. It just struck me how much it reminds me of C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, especially that second half, where it's talking about, let's lie in wait for the righteous man. Let's test him. Let's try to trip him up. Let's also test God. So that really just kind of struck me. And one of the notes, again, in my Ignatius Study Bible, is on the word envy, from verse 24. It says the term appears 12 times in the Bible, 3 times in the Greek Old Testament, and 9 times in the New Testament. Since classical times, envy has been defined as the inner pain or sadness one feels towards the good fortune of another. It is the opposite of goodwill and is closely allied with malice. In the Book of Wisdom, envy is directly opposed to wisdom and is expressed as the sinister force behind the devil's effort to strip the first man and woman of the gifts they received from God. Envy was also at work in the condemnation of Jesus, the new Adam. The leaders of Jerusalem were pained by the influence he was having with the crowds, and so they plotted his demise. Unlike jealousy, which seeks to emulate another or acquire a comparable good fortune, envy consists of wishing others harm and often engenders actions that would rob them of their blessings. In the moral teaching of the Church, envy is one of the 7 capital sins. Again, it just really kind of brought to mind the kind of chill I got when I was reading through C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, and the thought that this was written hundreds, thousands of years ago, but it could be written for today's times.
All right, thank you, Susan. Yeah, when I was reading it, and that word envy comes in the very last, next to the last verse, but just starting a verse before that, it says, "For God created man incorruptible to the image of his own likeness," and then it immediately goes into, "But by the envy of the devil, death came into the world." So the devil is envious that we are created in the image of God. This is what leads to his fall. Theologians believe his pride could not take that humans who were lower than him in some ways were closer to God, and that spurred his pride being the first sin, right? When we look at the cardinal virtues, wisdom is the first one, but on the sin side, it's pride. It's the gateway to all the others. I know that Nancy, Honey Badger, did a series on the Screw Tape letters. I think it's still going on. So I wanted to see, since Susan brought that up, if you have any comments on that.
It's interesting. Now that you mention it, Susan, I had not exactly put that together, but the entire chapter is essentially, the entire chapter could be applied, or the playbook of Screw Tape. Let us wait. Let us lie in wait for the righteous man, because he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions. He reproaches us for sins against the law and accuses us of sins against our training. I think that's very interesting, and that's an interesting point that you make as well. Yes, definitely. There's a lot of different things in here that we could probably see, especially, when we think of the word envy. And just because this is a space that we all share, I'd say, you see this a lot on social media, don't we? And it's good to always, I think people look at jealousy and envy as analogous, or, they're basically a synonym, but they're really not, because there's malice with envy. Whereas, you can, like it is said, parts of the Bible, our God is a jealous God. He wants us for himself. And so it's an entirely different thing. But with envy comes the intent of harm. And, so I would also say that when, we see this every day in, unfortunately, social media. And so, like I said, I only bring that up because it's applicable to a shared experience for everybody. You know what I mean? So thanks for that.
Eric.
What stood out to me the most in chapter 2 here was verses 4 and 5. And our name and time shall be forgotten, and no man shall have any remembrance of our works. For our time is as the passing of a shadow, and there is no going back of our end. For it is fast sealed, and no man returneth. It truly does hearken on, we should be living each and every day striving to grow in closer relationship to God. Us as Catholic, we a lot of times people forget this, and especially in this day and age where there's the hustle and bustle of fast-paced media or fast-paced anything, right? It distracts you from those things, and in some ways can draw you away from your ultimate end, which is to live for God, no matter the circumstances in your life, whether you be poor, you be rich, always striving to reach and live for God in your life, because he knows your day. He knows the day you're going to go, and when you go to him, he's going to be you're going to be ready to account for all the things you've done. So it's important to keep that in mind at all times. Truly, and it's just that's what stuck out to me the most in the beginning chapters here.
Thank you, Eric. Leona. You're still muted. We'll come back.
Hey, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. No, I'm here. I have a lag. Sorry about that. Right. So verses 12 through 20. This is prophetic. It is in regard to Jesus in the future. And in Luke, I think that's what I was looking up right there. Luke chapter 6, verse 7. So, yeah, this is prophecy in the future, because that's exactly what the Pharisees were doing. They were waiting, for him so that they could accuse him of whatever. He boasteth that he hath the knowledge of God, and calleth himself the Son of God. Well, there's the key word right there, Son of God, because that's exactly what he was saying. And when you read the New Testament, they didn't like that. He calleth himself the Son of God and maketh himself, the Son of God and all of that. So that's what strikes out to me. And he is grievous unto us. You notice that whenever people are just and try to be holy, the ones that are not, it's a testimony against them, because it shows them, that they're guilty. Like, the light is brightest in the darkness. So, so let us, and then verse 17, let us see then if his words be true. And when he was on the cross, when they were saying, if you are the Messiah, come down from the cross, and stuff like that, tempting him, which, even if he had come down, even still, they would have just said, oh, he worketh by Beelzebub, even if he had, and that was a temptation, which of course he, was triumphant. So that's what I get from this.
Thank you, Leona. Anybody else on the panel have any comments? I know I brought Raphael. I brought you up without talking to you before. Let us know if you have any comments. You can just raise your hand. The notes that I have sort of groups like 4 topics out of these 24 verses. The first few verses are about the ungodly, just kind of among themselves, their reasoning. They think, or they assume, that life ends at death, and there's going to be no accountability. There's no afterlife. And again, of course, this is in direct conflict to what the church teaches, that we have a mortal soul and that we have divine judgment, the particular judgment at the moment of death. What is it? The 4 last things: life, death, heaven, hell. The next sort of group of verses, as the chapter moves on, is them just sort of listing some pleasures they want to jump into. They want to exploit people. They want to live without restraint, because they don't think there's going to be any consequences. I mean, you can kind of see logically, if you didn't believe that, how the human soul, which has fallen, could get there. And again, this is something that seems very relevant to our time, where people worship freedom, and they think freedom means to indulge and pursue every carnal pleasure under the sun, where freedom in classical education is the freedom to do the right thing, the freedom to live according to God's rules, to restrain yourself with the virtues. The devil wanted freedom, and he got it. So freedom isn't free, but it's also, since the Enlightenment, been sort of elevated. We even see this in like patriotism, right? Freedom, freedom, freedom. We're not free because God has created us, and he has given us a certain roadmap, and we can't get away from that. Even if we say he doesn't exist, I could say gravity doesn't exist and go jump off the Empire State Building, but that's really irrelevant. What I think about it's really irrelevant. So for atheists, it's really irrelevant what they think. God's existence, of course, does not depend on their assent. So when we think about that word freedom, I think it's important to always bring in the Christian worldview. Freedom is freedom from sin, is freedom. There's a verse in the New Testament where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. That's what true freedom is, because sin enslaves you. And as we read last night in chapter 1, the Holy Spirit departs where there is iniquity. And then you become trapped in that. You become a prisoner of your desires, and it's really hard to get out on your own. So the chapter proceeds, it goes into a section where the wicked are plotting against the just man. They don't like that he reproves their sins. We can think about the New Testament. John the Baptist was calling out Herod, who was having a relationship with his brother's wife. Herod didn't like that. He He didn't want to be reminded of that. But John continued to call him out, and we're called to declare the truth. But it was kind of very dark in some of these verses. They wanted to test the endurance, right? Cause him pain. They were laying out a plan to kill him. So God is not going to intervene. And again, there's that ignoring, the final consequence, that there is some kind of a judgment at the end of our lives, that we're accountable for what we do. And then as the chapter wraps up, they're blinded really by their hatred, their malice. They don't understand the plan of God, which promises immortality to the righteous. And we see and we remember the death entered the world through the devil's envy. And those people of the devil follow him, but the just belong to God. So it's I think, a sobering chapter. It reminds us what really matters in our current life. We can get really caught up in distractions at work, or having a conflict with someone, or worried about getting, the new iPhone or whatever it is. We can get distracted by materialism and various other sins, gluttony and sexual sins. But we have to remember to keep the Christian mindset, which is very much set against today's culture. If you think back into the 1960s when the sexual revolution happened, these people were the revolutionaries. They were setting out to really destroy the family. There's a book that talks about this. Her name is Kate Millett. I think the book is called The Anti-Mary. But she literally wanted to destroy the nuclear family. And they've been successful in many ways. You can't say they're not. But today we are the revolutionaries, right? The culture's established, anything goes. But now we are the revolutionaries. It's kind of fun to be the revolutionary and sort of smash their ideas, and live in a countercultural mode. Countercultural used to be hippies in the van smoking pot. Today, counterculture is young people going to Latin Mass or whatever, people declaring they're going to wait to have sex when they get married, whatever it is. And now the people who want to defend the status quo, they don't like revolutionaries. It was okay when they were. It's sort of like our culture, we tolerance is promulgated a lot. Tolerance is not a Christian virtue. It is not Christian to be tolerant of evil. And the ungodly, or that side, always preaches tolerance until they are in power. And once they have power, they are not tolerant. They are vicious. You look at Marxists that come to power, communists that come to power. They go after the church. They kill priests. They burn churches. They're not very tolerant. It's a lie. And the devil is the greatest marketing director in history. His first marketing campaign is in the Garden of Eden, sort of pointing Eve away, saying you're not going to die if you do this. And on some level, there was a little truth in that, right? She didn't drop dead physically, right? It was a spiritual death. There's always a little bit of truth that the devil sort of weaves in. It's sort of like you can't get a dog to eat a poison pill, but if you wrap it in a hamburger, you can. And so we have to be wise to the devil's methods, which is why something like Screw Tape is a great book to read.